Hi, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and we are here with another weekly installment of Better, Newsweek's live stream interview show. And this week, our guests are Mollie West Duffy and Liz Fosslien. They are the authors of a new book. It is called Big Feelings. It came out in April, and they are on the pulse of the zeitgeist because everybody wants to talk about feelings, and it is an important conversation for us to be having about how we can thrive through difficult times. If you are tuning in live and joining us, please type into the chat box and let us know who you are, where you are calling in from, and any questions that you have for Mollie and Liz. We'd love to tackle them. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Oh my goodness, it's so great to have you here, and you are doing such cool and innovative work with your books. And so the first thing that I actually wanted to ask about and sort of lean into in Big Feelings, you list a bunch of myths that we are all dealing with and encountering. And myth number one is about uncertainty. And it's the idea that certainty is attainable. Now, I think this makes a lot of sense. Obviously, it's a very uncertain world we have, but I can imagine that for some people that might even feel more stressful. Like, oh no, you're telling me this isn't even a thing. So let's start there. In this extremely uncertain world that has been, pretty darn uncertain for the past 2 years. How are we all doing with this? Why was that the starting point for Big Feelings? And how can we learn to better adapt in a world that is so uncertain? Why don't we start? I'm just, I know it's always confusing when there's more than one guest. So I'm going to start with Liz, just so there's some order to this process, and then we'll chime in with you, Mollie, if you'd like to add in. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
All right,
the
amazing.
sign of a great facilitator when they're like, here's what's happening.
Take us away.
Yeah, so with uncertainty, the past 2 years, I think, have felt unprecedented and have been that. We looked at Google searches for the word unprecedented in March 2020. It's this enormous spike. But the truth is, as you said, the world has never been certain. And there's many examples of this. You can get in a car accident. I think that, something really good can happen. You can run into someone you never thought you would, and then suddenly a job opportunity comes out of that. So that can feel destabilizing of this, oh, we're never going to get to certainty. But in fact, it should be a little comforting because you've never operated in uncertainty. And so you've kind of been through this every single day. So I think there's some confidence that can help you build. Humans also hate uncertainty. There's research that shows that we would rather know that something bad is going to happen tomorrow than have a 50% chance of that something bad happening, because we feel more in control. So one of the tips that we give in our book of better dealing with all this is one simple phrase, which is, I am a person learning to blank. And so when we are confronted with a situation that feels new, when we're not sure what's going to happen the next day, we tend to look for opportunities to control things, to put certainty in place. And a lot of that includes putting a burden on ourselves to have everything figured out right away. So for me, when my company switched to remote work overnight at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember thinking, I need to be a great manager in a remote setting, and I just need to figure everything out for my team. And I was probably just a rigid robot for the first couple of days, because I just showed up and was like, hello, everyone, everything is fine. Don't worry about it. I've got it under control. And then I came across this phrase and instead said, I am a person learning to be a good manager in a remote setting for the first time during a global pandemic. Really different mindset. So I was able to give myself grace and then take on more of a growth mindset, and actually went to my team and said, I don't know exactly what I'm doing. Help me. Tell me what's working. Tell me what's not. Tell me what you're going through. And so I think it just allows us, it seems it's not going to transform all your feelings right away. That's not anything we try to say in the book. There's no magical phrase, but I do think it's helpful in at least taking that first step of, it's okay. It's fine to not know everything. And I have the confidence that I will adjust. I can adapt. I can learn what I need to learn tomorrow to face whatever comes up.
Fantastic. Mollie West Duffy, anything you'd like to add about uncertainty?
these phrases, and Liz mentioned one of them, can be so helpful to us. They're, when we're in an overwhelming space, it's like, okay, what's my go-to? Like, what do I say to myself, or what's my mantra? So another thing that we read about in the book is called making a plan from which you'll deviate. And this actually comes from a woman named Laura Gallagher, who is an organizational psychologist, and she actually has worked with teams at NASA. And she said that even at NASA, they refer to agendas or plans as plans from which we will deviate. And she shared, the benefit of planning is actually doing the thinking around what are we going to do if this happens? What are we going to do if this happens? And getting the team on the same page. It's not to say, okay, this is exactly how it's going to be, and we expect nothing to change, because things are going to change. So there's value in planning, but we need to get our hands off the wheel a little bit when things go wrong, and we need to not blame ourselves. So just starting from the point of view of things are going to deviate, things are going to change.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. We're here with Liz Fosslien and Mollie West Duffy. They are the author of the new book, Big Feelings, and we're talking about how to thrive during difficult times. This is Dorie Clark. We're here with Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better. And I want to say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in and joining us from around the world. Thank you for being here, everybody. This is great. We have Diana from Portugal, Kristen from Philly, Christine from Rochester. We have a LinkedIn friend from Riyadh. We have Allison in Texas. We have John Ardon from the UK, Mireille from Turkey, Edie from Delaware. We have a LinkedIn friend from Philly. We've got Haley from Virginia, Lamas from Kuwait, Natalie from Paris, Henrik from Sweden, Kate from Boulder, Colorado, and many more. We love having you. Please type your questions into the chat box for Liz and Mollie. And if you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like and share button so that your friends can benefit from it. Now, Liz and Mollie, one of the things that you have talked about in Big Feelings is breaking the stress cycle. Now, I know that probably a lot of us have been feeling stress lately, especially over the past couple of years. It often, we know this, right? Intuitively, it does feed on itself. The more stressed you are, the more stressed you get, because you're like, oh, I have the problem and I'm stressed about the problem, and the stress is causing more problems. It seems impossible to get out of this hamster wheel. How do we do it? Mollie, what's your take?
So this stress cycle comes from a book called Burnout, which is written by two sisters, the Nagoski sisters. And we really love this because it reminds us that we are designed as humans to deal with some stress, right? So back on the savannah, when we were running away from, lions, we had stress, but there were moments of stress, and then we were able to move out of that into the rest and digest part of the cycle. And so our bodies in our modern work lives, we don't have that time. So we might have a really stressful meeting, and then we go directly into another meeting, and we have no time to press reset. And so that does then end up adding to itself, and that's when we can start to have burnout. So I notice I'm inching towards burnout when I have had more than one day in a row where I'm in back-to-back meetings. I can do one day, but the second day, if I'm in back-to-back meetings, I'm like, man, my stress is levels are elevating. So a couple of ways to work through this. So one is just to build in more pauses during the day to do that reset. And it doesn't need to be a long period of time. It can be 5 minutes. So you can get up, you can walk around your house, you can laugh, you can hug someone in your house if there's someone with you. All of these are really good ways to break the stress cycle. And for me personally, I do have to be mindful about scheduling those times in, because if I don't even get that 5-minute break. So scheduling shorter meetings, moving meetings. I'm a big believer in looking at your calendar on Sunday night and saying, okay, that's going to be a crazy day. That's not being kind to myself. Like that Wednesday I know how I'm going to feel at the end of that Wednesday. So what meetings do I need to push back? And oftentimes people feel bad pushing back meetings, but I think, a lot of times when you do that, the person's like, thank you. I had a really busy day too. And this is helpful for me.
Yeah, that's such a great point. If you want to learn more about Liz and Mollie, go to lizandmollie.com. Their newest book is Big Feelings, and we're talking about how to thrive during difficult times. We also wanted to say hi. We have amazing folks from around the world tuning in to join us. Nancy is here from Connecticut. We have a LinkedIn friend from Vermont. Vani is here from the south of France. We have a LinkedIn friend from Toronto. Sushma, our regular viewer, is here from India. Rami is here from Syria. Alicia is here from Oakland. We have Iqbal. We have Rufino from Peru. We have Celeste from South Africa, Michelle from St. Louis, and Don from Colorado. We love having all of you. And a question came in. I'm gonna focus this one on Liz. It's actually great. I feel like it's almost written in haiku form from our friend Cynthia in Los Angeles. Perspective on how to prevent the return to offices from being an emotional roller coaster. I feel like that's the title of the haiku, and then would be helpful to know. Yes, it would. We support that, Cynthia. So, Liz, what is your thought about return to work and how we can prevent this from being such a stressor?
Yeah, so I think what we've learned over the past year is that just to be flexible with plans. So I think the return to work has been happening. I remember in March 2020, it was like, see you in 2 weeks. And that obviously didn't happen. And then last summer there was a push, and then there was another. It's sort of back and forth. So I think in messaging, hopefully people have learned this by now, it's not being so strict about it. Like, okay, on January 15th or July 15th, this is our big moment when we'll all be back in the office. Things are shifting. There could be another wave. There's all kinds of things going on. So I think a more gradual approach is a nice way of, similar to Mollie's point about plans from which we'll deviate, of setting expectations that this is what we're aiming to do. Things might still change, but here's some things to consider. And then two other tips I'd give are really trying to think of ways to pull people back to the office as opposed to push them. So a lot of these policies have been rolled out as be back in the office Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, see you there. And that's, why? Why should I come back? I've been thriving, or not, maybe not thriving, but some people will say, like, I've been doing my job remotely. So explaining the why, and then really focusing on what do people gain from being back in person, and emphasizing that. So it's easier for brainstorming. It's easier to mentor each other. It's nicer to form bonds, and then that will smooth over the time that we're not together in person. And then once you've communicated that, actually making sure that that is the experience when people come back to the office. So you can't promise that people will have a nice time, like form closer connections, find ways to learn new things from each other, and then have no intentionality around in-person time. So everyone's just like at a desk working, and they're like, okay, well, this is not what you said, and I could easily be doing this from my living room in sweatpants, and I wouldn't have had to commute this morning. And the final thing I'll say is, I think really making it obvious and clear where people can turn if they have questions or concerns. So again, that might be you as the manager, it might be HR if they have questions about policies, but really saying, we want this to feel good. We want you to gain the benefits of being in person together. And part of that is making sure that you're not anxious. And so my door is always open. Here's someone on the HR team you can reach out to if you have questions. I think those are two really, like, this pulling people back and then making it clear it's okay to have concerns, and here's how you voice those to someone.
Really helpful. Thank you so much. We are here with the authors of the new book, Big Feelings. It's Mollie West Duffy and Liz Fosslien. If you want to learn more about them, just go to lizandmollie.com. And we have great folks tuning in from all across the world. We love having you. Thoraya is here from Egypt. We have Gabriel from Mexico, Karen from Boston. We have a LinkedIn user from Mexico City. We have Tomel from Oceanside, California. Ebru is joining from Istanbul. Doris from Ecuador. We have Sylvia from Toledo, and Elvia from Mexico, and Julie from Brighton, UK. Trisha from Ottawa is a big fan. We love having all of you. Now, Mollie, a question that I have for you. You guys wrote an article for Harvard Business Review, and you talked about an interesting topic that I think perhaps a lot of people struggle with, which is how to talk about your emotions without getting emotional. Can you expound on that a little bit and what we need to do so that we can be more effective in that pursuit?
One of the things that when we say we're fans of emotion at work, people always say, okay, but does that mean that you're suggesting that we start yelling and screaming at work? And we say, no, definitely not. So we all need to learn how to talk about our emotions without getting emotional. It's totally acceptable to feel anger and frustration and sadness at work. We are humans. We bring those emotions to work, whether we want to or not. But what we can get better at is feeling those emotions and not immediately sharing those emotions when they are too heightened. So we want to think about what is the best way to share what I'm feeling with someone else in a way that is productive, in a way that they can listen. So we did a workshop once with a woman who said that she was an admin assistant to somebody, and that person yelled at her all the time. And she knew that the anger wasn't directed at her, but it was just the frustration from the day, and she happened to be on the receiving end of it. And finally, she said to her boss, she said, "When you yell at me or when you raise your voice at work, I tune out. Like I stop listening because I'm going to a place of trying to protect myself from this anger and process like the loud noises that are coming at me." And so that helped her boss understand like, oh, that's having the opposite effect of what I want, right? Like this person who I want to do a good job at work is actually like tuning out from listening to me when I'm raising my voice because they're so distracted by my anger. So, what can you do about that? So the first thing is you want to pause and recognize what's coming up for you. And so every person has different triggers for emotions and trying to catch the pattern. So Liz is one of her anger triggers is when people are chewing really loudly next to her. Like we each have our own individual triggers and just being aware, okay, like, so this is an anger trigger for me. So I'm probably about to get really angry. Pausing and sitting with the emotion to the point where you're able to get really granular about what's going on. So if I just say like, "Oh my gosh, I'm feeling so stressed right now." That's not very granular. But if I can pause and say, "Okay, why am I feeling really stressed right now?" Well, I'm somebody who likes to get all of my work done ahead of time and I'm leading a team and I feel like we're about to miss a deadline and we're procrastinating and that's giving me a lot of anxiety. That's way more specific. But it takes time to do that processing to figure out, "Oh, that's why I'm feeling this way." And once you've been able to figure that out, then you can come back and share with whoever it is, "Hey, I had a really strong reaction. I want to share with you what was behind that reaction. Here's the need that I'm feeling." But do it in a way that's calm and productive. And this is easier said than done, I know, but we can get better at it with practice.
Absolutely. Little cat intermission here. Thank you very much, Molly. That's great. We are here with the authors of the book Big Feelings. It's Liz and Molly, and you can learn about them at lizandmolly.com. We're talking about how to thrive during difficult times. If you're enjoying this session, if you're tuning in, just hit the like button and the share button so that your friends can join in and benefit as well. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly Newsweek interview shows, just go to my website, DorieClark.com. You can sign up to get a free self-assessment. And in the process, you will join my email list and you'll get reminders for great and fun conversations like this. A great question actually came in from Haley. Haley is in Dallas, and I'm going to quickly remove this because it's a long question and I don't want to cut off your face, Liz, because the question is going to go to you. Haley wants to know, how do you build back trust with the team when there have been several leadership changes over the last several months? I mean, a lot of organizations have probably experienced this, right? We've been talking about the great resignation. There's lots of staff turnover. If in your organization there's been a lot of leadership changes, how do you actually build back trust with employees? She says the changes have led to team members holding back more and not speaking up in meetings. If you were advising someone in a situation like this, Liz, what would you suggest?
Yeah, so I would say starting by practicing something Molly and I call selective vulnerability. And so this is pairing a moment of openness with a path forward. And when there's a lot of changes or when there's something that we know is affecting people negatively, I think often there's this impulse to just not address it because it's like, okay, I don't want to get into this thorny thing. I don't want to remind people again of what's going on. But people know, they're very aware of it. And so you're not going to remind them. You're just going to actually make them feel like you understand them and can empathize with them. So in this situation, I would probably start to try to earn back trust and build psychological safety by clearly addressing it and also sharing a bit how it's affecting you. And how much you share is dependent on how open you feel with your team, how safe the environment is. But it might be saying something like, I just want to start this meeting off by saying I know we've had a lot of leadership changes over the past couple of years. I have also felt that's stressful. It's anxiety inducing to have things change, to see that happening. If you have questions, if there are concerns, I want to emphasize you can always come to me in one-on-ones. You can bring it up in team meetings. And then, so that's this moment of openness, addressing what's happening, what people are going through, and then pairing it with a path forward. So that's the piece that shows that you have thought about how to support your team, and that really builds your credibility as a leader they'll want to follow. So that might look like, over the next few months, here's what I'm going to be doing to ensure that at least our team has clear goals that we're working towards, that roles and responsibilities have been clearly defined. And here's what I need from you. I need from you feedback along the way. Let me know what's working, what's not. Come to me with everything on your plate so I can help you better prioritize. And so again, it's protecting your team a bit from the higher level changes, while again communicating, I'm here thinking of you. I'm not ignoring the problem. I'm not sweeping it under the rug. I'm actually taking proactive steps to make sure that at least we all feel like we're moving together towards some bigger, meaningful goal.
Really helpful. This is Liz Fosslien. She is the co-author with Mollie West Duffy, who's also here, of the book Big Feelings. And we're talking about how to thrive during difficult times. We want to say hi to some of the great friends tuning in. If you're just joining, let us know who you are, where you're dialing in from. We have Maureen from Boston, Jayanta from India, Jennifer's in Jacksonville Beach, Rocio is here from Peru, Shashid Hara is here from Houston, Rafal from Poland, and Jailton from Brazil, and Nikhil from India. We love having all of you. And a question came in that I think is great from Alicia. She is curious about your thoughts about destigmatizing some of these emotions that a lot of people consider to be, maybe a little bit of a third rail. Things like anger, frustration, even the word emotional sometimes has a negative rap. You two, of course, are the author of the book Big Feelings. So you're leaning into this whole emotion situation. What do we do about destigmatizing the very notion of emotions? Why don't we turn to Mollie for that one? Mollie, what are your thoughts?
Yes, there's so much stigma around big emotions, and we learn this from a really young age, that anger in some households is not an acceptable emotion to share. That things like uncertainty, it's like, yeah, that's a bad emotion to have. Burnouts, we label them as bad, and they can be really difficult to move through. But during our research for the book, we talked with psychologists who said it's actually not helpful to label emotions as good or bad. They just are. And we can ask ourselves in the moment, okay, is this an emotion that's helpful for me to listen to right now or not? So maybe we're making a big decision and we say, okay, we're feeling really angry about something else. Is that an emotion that we want to have affect our decision? But when we stigmatize them, there's two things that happen. One is that we tend to suppress the emotions, and so we miss out on learning what the emotion is trying to tell us. So oftentimes there's a deeper need behind the emotion. Underneath anger, there might be fear. So anger can be a sign that something that we care about has been violated, and we're afraid that it's going to continue to be violated. Underneath envy or regret could be, actually, we need to make a change. Like there's something we need to change in our lives. So we miss out on that information when we're just like, this is bad and I shouldn't be feeling this. The other thing we miss out on is being able to learn from other people who have gone through similar emotions. And Liz and I both experienced this through the ups and downs that we write about in the book, when we're able to open up and share, I'm going through a really difficult time right now. It's amazing how many people say, I'm so sorry to hear that, and then share something that they went through that was similar. And you realize, we're all going through big emotions all the time. And it feels less lonely when you're able to open up about them.
That's great. Thank you very much. We are here talking about big feelings. This is the new book by Mollie West Duffy and Liz Fosslien. And we want to say hi to our friends from around the world. We have wonderful folks tuning in, like Ernest from Edmonton, and we have Ellie joining us from London, and Lynn from Washington, Hetty's joining from Philadelphia. And a question came in. I love this one from Sushma in India. And I want to direct it to you, Liz. What Sushma is interested in, she says, what are the things that we can do to build higher emotional strength? Obviously emotions are crucial in dealing with almost everything. Is there a form of, let's call it, emotional cross training that we can do? Do we just, have to kind of wing it? Or is there something we could do, almost like going to the gym, that can build our emotional strength in advance? What would you say to that?
Yeah, so it's definitely a muscle that you can build, is this learning to move through difficult emotions, and they're never going to go away. So one thing we say in the book is there's no, this is about better recovering from difficult emotions versus never feeling them again. This is what you sign up for in life. You're going to go through hard times. And so the steps that we encourage people to take are, first, acknowledge what you're feeling. So don't suppress it. To Molly's point, don't run away from it. You actually want to sit there and say, here's what I'm feeling, get really granular about it. So as opposed to, like Molly said, anger, what's behind my anger, which brings us to the next step, which is understand. So acknowledge, I'm feeling this thing. What is the need behind this emotion? So if you're really anxious, why are you anxious? Is it because you didn't sleep at all? Or is it because you have a deadline on Friday that's really, really stressful and you're not quite sure that you're going to make it? And then the third step is figuring out the next best thing you can do to address that need. So it's acknowledge, understand, and then action. And the action might be, again, get a good night's sleep. Molly and I, when it comes to sleep and anger, we really hate the advice, never go to bed angry. Go to bed angry. Sometimes you're tired. So really it's about figuring out what the next best step is. In the case of the deadline, it might be, what are non-essential parts of the project that you can drop to make sure that you're doing high quality work and still meeting that deadline? Can you ask your manager for help? Can you turn to your team for help? Those kinds of things. And once you start to do this a couple times, I think it's a really nice virtuous cycle of, it will feel really good because you feel like you're taking action, you're proactively moving through some of these harder moments. Obviously that, if you're going through despair or if you just lost a loved one, it's not quite as simple. That's what we talk about in big feelings. But then it might, the action might be like, I just need to get through this hour. And it's still something you can do. Like, I just need to get through today. And that still is a more digestible goal, a way of moving through that big feeling. And then hopefully in the morning you'll feel better. But it's practice. And I would say it really starts with just admitting that you have the feeling in the first place, and then you can move forward.
Amen to that. That's great. We're here with Liz Fosslien and Mollie West Duffy, authors of the new book, Big Feelings. We have time for perhaps just one more question as we are coming to our close. Molly, I want to turn this one over to you. Trisha had a question coming in from Canada, and she is curious. She says, the relationship focus is intriguing. I'm wondering if you've come across insights that maybe, when, hopefully, if you're sharing hard feelings, you're sharing some of the difficult stuff with other people, that it might perhaps bring you closer in some way. We assume that if we're, talking about or sharing quote unquote negative emotions, that it might do damage to the relationship. But is it possible that it might actually be beneficial? What do you think, and what have you seen out there?
Thank you for this question. I love this question. For the most part, I think it is very beneficial, and I'll give one caveat to this, but for the most part, and Liz and I have experienced this firsthand, and the research backs this up, that when we do open up and get vulnerable about what we are feeling, it does strengthen relationships. And the reason for that is it builds trust. So somebody feels really honored. Wow, you trusted me enough to share this difficult thing that you're going through or you're feeling. And that just like ratchets up the trust. And then that person feels like, well, I can trust you to share what's going on for me. And it really deepens relationships. Liz mentioned earlier, we have this phrase called selective vulnerability. And so in a workplace context, sometimes people wonder, well, how much is too much to share? Like, how do I know if I can share this? And you should ask yourself, well, how would I feel if the other person told me what I'm about to tell them? And most of the time you'd be like, wow, I'm really honored that this colleague shared this with me. Sometimes you might say, I don't know that person in quite that way because they're a work colleague, and that feels like a little bit too much information that person shared. And then you might want to pick a different, colleague if it's in a work context where you're sharing. But for the most part, once we start sharing, we realize, oh, wow, I feel so much better. And it actually has strengthened my relationships, which, as this person said, is sometimes the opposite of what we think it might do.
Fantastic. We've been here with Liz Fosslien and Mollie West Duffy. You can learn more about them and their new book, Big Feelings, at lizandmollie.com. Again, this is Dorie Clark here with our weekly interview show, Better, for Newsweek. Tune in every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, and learn more at dorieclark.com. Liz and Mollie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you next Thursday, and take care, everyone.